Sullivan's Crossing Season 3 highlighted Maggie's ridiculous problem. You ever watch a show and feel like the writers are gaslighting you? Like they expect you to just nod along while the plot does backflips, and you're sitting there like, wait a second, am I the only sane person in this room? Because that's exactly how I felt watching Sullivan's Crossing Season 3, when Maggie Sullivan's so-called ridiculous problem finally got addressed, but instead of solving it, the show somehow made it even more absurd. And let me tell you, I've been biting my tongue for 2 seasons, trying to play nice, but I can't anymore. Because Maggie's biggest struggle isn't her father, it isn't Cal, it isn't even her emotional whiplash. No, Maggie's real problem is that she is a neurosurgeon who is somehow treated like a town superhero in a country where she literally isn't even licensed to practice medicine. Yeah, you heard me right. The big secret nobody wants to talk about. Maggie can't legally touch a scalpel in Canada. She's a US trained doctor, Boston license, impressive credentials, but in Nova Scotia, she's about as qualified as me after binge watching Grey's Anatomy. Now let me just pause for a second, because if you're new here, hi, I'm Sophia and this is Breakdown Epic. We rip apart TV logic, expose the cracks, and dig into the forbidden knowledge that showrunners hope you won't notice. And trust me, if you've ever screamed at your TV during Sullivan's Crossing, this video is for you. Oh, and while you're here, make sure you hit subscribe right now, because you're not going to find this kind of breakdown anywhere else. Okay, back to Maggie. The town of Timberlake treats her like she's some prodigy, like she's been walking on water ever since she came back from Boston. People run to her for medical advice, emergencies, consultations. You'd think she was the only person with a stethoscope within 100 miles. But here's the catch. Every time she jumps in to save the day, the show itself reminds us she's technically not allowed to practice medicine in Canada. So which is it? Is she the hero doctor saving lives, or the outlaw neurosurgeon moonlighting in a Canadian soap opera version of House MD? The whiplash is insane. And Season 3 tried to play with this tension like, oh no, Maggie can't officially be on the rescue team. Oh no, Maggie shouldn't interfere at the hospital. But then 5 minutes later, what happens? Someone collapses, and suddenly she's front and center, diagnosing, advising, and basically running the show. Tell me that's not ridiculous. Here's the forbidden knowledge that the show doesn't want casual viewers to think about in real life. It's not just a matter of oops, different country, no big deal. Medical licensing is one of the strictest, most bureaucratic processes in the world. It takes years of exams, paperwork, and approvals. If Maggie wanted to officially practice in Nova Scotia, she'd be drowning in red tape. But Sullivan's Crossing, nah, she just strolls in, gets a temporary license, like it's a library card, and boom, time to crack open somebody's skull. And speaking of skulls, yes, we need to talk about that surgery. But hold on, we're not there yet. Because before we get into the absurdity of Maggie operating on Edna Cranebear in the season finale, we need to talk about why the entire setup of her being a doctor in Timberlake is basically built on sand. Think about it. Maggie comes back to Timberlake under this huge cloud of scandal, a malpractice suit that almost destroyed her career. She's already questioning her place in medicine, questioning her family, her future with Cal. And the show had this golden opportunity to explore what happens when someone whose whole identity is tied to their job suddenly can't do that job anymore. That would have been powerful, right? That would have been emotional storytelling. But instead, they gave us this half-baked loophole where Maggie both is and isn't allowed to practice, depending on whether the plot needs her to save the day or not. It's the kind of inconsistency that makes you want to throw popcorn at the screen. And here's my personal theory: the writers were terrified. They knew if they completely took medicine away from Maggie, fans would riot. Because without the neurosurgeon angle, who is she? Just a small town girl with daddy issues and a love triangle. They couldn't risk it, so they dangled the forbidden fruit. She's a doctor, but not really, but yes, actually, when it's convenient. Which raises the ultimate question: is Maggie Sullivan actually one of the most unrealistic doctors in TV history? Because if we compare her to medical characters in other dramas, Grey's Anatomy, ER, even Virgin River, those shows at least pretend to respect the licensing process. Sullivan's Crossing just shrugs and says, and she's brilliant, let her do her thing. And I don't know about you, but that drives me crazy. Because as much as I love this show, as much as I love Morgan Cohen's performance, the suspension of disbelief has limits. And Season 3 pushed it to the breaking point. But wait, if you think Maggie casually giving medical advice without a license is bad, just wait until you hear what happened in the finale. Because the show crossed a line that even I didn't think they'd dare to touch. And the fallout. Oh, it's not just ridiculous, it's insulting. Alright, let's rip the band-aid off. Because here's the moment that made me scream into my pillow. The Sullivan's Crossing Season 3 finale had Maggie, this US licensed, not legally cleared in Canada neurosurgeon, waltz into an operating room and perform surgery on Edna Cranebear. Now, let's be real, Edna deserved the best care possible. But can we talk about how absolutely unrealistic it is that Maggie was allowed to scrub in at all? The show tried to handwave it with this whole temporary license explanation. Like, what does that even mean? Temporary how for one surgery? For the weekend, was there a pop-up kiosk outside the hospital like, step right up, get your 48-hour medical pass? Forbidden knowledge time in real life. This isn't how medicine works. At all. licensing bodies are some of the most rigid institutions on earth. If you move across state lines, you need paperwork. If you move countries, you're looking at exams, certifications, oversight, years of red tape. You don't just slide in like, hey, I used to be great in Boston. Mind if I crack open a skull real quick? And yet, that's exactly what the show wants us to believe. Which leads me to a question for you guys. If you were lying on an operating table, would you rather have someone with a shiny Harvard degree but no Canadian license? Or the fully licensed local doctor, who maybe isn't as flashy? Drop your answer in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious if I'm the only one side eyeing Maggie's miracle pass. Here's the thing that burns me up. Maggie's medical dilemma could have been one of the most powerful storylines in the whole show. Imagine if she actually had to grapple with being sidelined, forced to find new ways to contribute, maybe even redefine her identity outside the OR. That's drama, that's growth, that's raw storytelling. But instead, they gave us what I call Schrodinger's neurosurgeon. Maggie is simultaneously banned from practicing and somehow the towns go to savior. One minute she's lamenting that she can't legally help, the next she's single-handedly saving lives. And the finale leaned into that inconsistency so hard, it basically broke the show's own rules. And can I just roast Timberlake for a second? This town apparently has hospitals, rescue teams, trained doctors. But every time something goes down, people look around like, where's Maggie? We need her. Like really? Nobody else in Nova Scotia can handle this. Is the entire Canadian healthcare system hanging on one Boston-trained neurosurgeon who wasn't even supposed to be there? That's not a small-town drama. That's a Marvel origin story. Here's my theory, and you guys tell me if I'm crazy. I think the writers know Maggie's prodigy status is ridiculous. I think they leaned into it in season 3 almost as a wink to the audience like, yeah, we know it doesn't make sense, but isn't it fun watching her save the day anyway? But for me, that's lazy. Because instead of resolving her ridiculous problem, they turned it into a running gag. Quick poll for you, should season 4 strip Maggie of her medical powers entirely and force her to live like a normal human? Or do you want to keep the fantasy of Dr. Sullivan, Timberlake's superhero surgeon? Honestly, I'd love to see season 4 get bold. Imagine Maggie having to actually sit back during an emergency. Imagine her watching someone else save the day. Imagine her realizing she's more than her scalpel. That's the kind of forbidden character growth that could change the whole show. And let's not pretend Maggie is the only ridiculous thing here. Cal, the love triangle, Sully's fatherly redemption arc. This show thrives on contradictions. But Maggie's medical loophole stands out because it's the backbone of her character. If you take away the credibility of her career, what's left? Just a bundle of contradictions and plot conveniences. And hey, maybe that's why we keep watching. Because deep down, we all know Sullivan's Crossing isn't about realism. It's about emotional fireworks. It's about nostalgia and family and romance and those throw your popcorn at the TV moments. And, you know what? I'll admit it. I love it for that. Even when I'm groaning, I'm hooked. Because when a show makes you this frustrated, it also means it's making you feel something. But let me leave you with this. Season 3 wanted us to believe Maggie solved her ridiculous problem by magically getting a temporary license. But in reality, nothing's been solved. The tension is still there, the contradiction still unresolved, which means season 4 either has to double down on the fantasy, or finally make Maggie face the consequences. And I want to know what you think. Is Maggie the heart of Sullivan's Crossing, or is she secretly its biggest flaw? Comment below, because I read every single one and your theories always blow my mind. At the end of the day, Sullivan's Crossing is one of those shows that thrives on stretching reality until it almost snaps. And Maggie's medical mess, it's the perfect example. It's ridiculous, it's frustrating, it's addictive. And it's why we're still here talking about it. So if you stuck around this long, you're officially one of us. The people who don't just watch TV, we break it down, rip it apart, and demand better. And trust me, season 4 is going to give us even more contradictions to feast on. Until then, keep questioning, keep roasting, and remember in Timberlake, you don't need a license to practice medicine. You just need to be Maggie Sullivan.